Welcome back to Forging a Minecraft Mod, lecture number 2, items. So before the break we did a lot of different things. We added our own wand item, and that wand item, well, shot something up in the air, a mob, and it had a crafting recipe. It showed us how many times we had used it, have a proper icon, a name, and well, that's about it. But what do we want to do with this amount of times we've used it? Obviously we want to do something with it. And well, if you've taken a look on the textures that I have, then you will probably guess what we're going to do. We have one wand icon and one wand charged icon. Okay, so I want to define something here called is charged, basically. And well, private boolean is charged, and then we want to give it a damage value that we want to use, like that. And how do we decide if it's charged or not? Well, I'm just going to say if the damage value is greater than or equals to 10, then this one has been charged enough. What do we want to do if it's charged? Well, it's quite easy. We can, for instance, say if it's charged here, item stack dot get item damage. So we send along the item damage there from the stack, and if it's charged, if the damage is greater than or equals to 10, then we can add another line. So each time we do info.add, we're going to add another line of text, so we can just say this item is charged. And maybe you want to add that in a different color or something, but I'm not going to cover that at the moment. If you're interested, you can just take a look on how other items do it. So we want to add this item is charged if it's charged, but it's a bit silly to just do that, right? So what do we want to do? Obviously, if it's charged, we want to do something with it, something special. So let's go up here to the method, the unnamed method, which does special things when we, well, right-click a mob, shoots it into the air, and increase the amount of times we've used it by 1. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, I'm going to do it like this. First we want to check if it's charged, obviously. So if it's charged, then, well, let's type this first. So we do the same thing, we get the item damage from the item stack and check if it's charged. If it's not charged, then I want it to increase the times we have used it. And if we use a charged one, we sort of want to deplete the charge, so we reset it. Item stack dot set item damage and to 0. So we set it back to 0 when you use it in its charged mode. So we can use it normally, well, 10 times, and then we can use it in its charged mode, and then we can, well, charge it once again. So what do we want to do here? Well, shooting a mob up into the air is fun and all, but what if we can just punch it away and make it fly in an arc? Wouldn't that be quite amazing? I think so. So the algorithm I do here is a very simple one. It's basically going to push the mob away from us. I'm going to multiply it with 2, so it's going a bit faster. But observe that this is not the best algorithm for punching things away from you, because basically if you're a bit further away from it, you're going to punch harder and things like that. But the only reason why I set it up like this is so we will punch it away from us. If we just set it like motion x equals 5, then it's going to fly away in a certain direction. It won't care about where the player is compared to the target. Pause scene like so and multiply it with 2. So if it's charged, we do two things. We reset the charge amount by setting the item damage to 0. Then we make sure that the mob flies away from us, so basically we punch it and it flies away in an arc. Of course, it will still get the motion upwards, because that's outside the if statement. Sweet. But we're forgetting one last thing. One thing? What was that? Well, let's take a look again, shall we? Well, the icon. We have a specific icon for it. So how do we make sure that that one is loaded when the item is charged, to tell us, well, this item is charged, and then we can see in the description it says this item is charged, and so on. So let's take a look how we can do that. Well, first of all, we might want to register another icon. That would make sense, right? We registered the normal icon, so we might want to register the charged icon. How do we do this? Well, the same way that we did before. Item info dot texture location, because it's going to be in the same folder. Then of course we need that colon, and then the name of this icon. Wand, what should I call it? Wand charged icon. Of course that doesn't exist, so I will have to add that. We go into the item info and define it here. Public static final string. I just copy that. Wand charged icon equals what is called, I think it's called wand underscore charged. Yes, it is. I just had to double check. There you go. So now we can refer to that. But we don't have an icon here called charged icon. Why didn't we have to create item icon? Well, the item icon is the default icon that we can use. Well, basically, in the item class here, the one we extend, it has this item icon here, so that's the default one, and that is totally fine to just use that if you just want one single icon for this item. However, if we want multiple ones, then we obviously need to create some more icons, and they do not exist already, so we'll have to create them. I'm going to create private icon. What's it going to be called? Well, like I called it down there, not really charged icon, like that. We, however, need to do two things. First of all, we need to do side, how do you spell that? Yeah, just side only. And then side.client, because we only want this icon on the client side, and then we also, of course, want to import the icon so it knows what's going on there. The icon we want is, of course, the Minecraft version. There we go. Sweet. So now we can register another icon. Fine, let's start now. There's no reason to start it now, because we're registering multiple icons, so we can use multiple icons, but we're not defining which icon to use. Why haven't we done this before? Well, if we use just one icon, and we store that icon in item icon, the default icon we're going to use is indeed that icon. So if we just have one icon of our item, just store it in item icon and everything is sorted. If you have multiple icons that you want to define when they should be used, well, then we will have to use another method to define which icon we should use. So what is that one called? Well, first of all, we want to override it, and second of all, we want to have it on just one side. On the client, of course. There's no reason to have any information about which icons to use on the server side. So then we can use the icon here. So it's called public icon get icon from damage, and we get a item damage here, and yeah, it must return an icon. That's what it's complaining about. So we'll get an item damage here, and then we can use that, and then we need to return the icon that we want to use. So which icon do we want to use? Well, we might want to use the normal wand one, or we might want to use the charged version of it, depending on if it's charged or not. So the code in here is going to be quite simple. If it's charged, and then we give it a damage. Oops, damage. There you go. If this is the case, then we want to return charged icon. However, if the item is not charged, we want to return not charged icon, the item icon, the default one, the one we have here. So we have the normal wand icon and we have the charged version, and depending on if it's charged or not, we want to return different icons. So what have we done here? Well, we set up something called isCharged here that we're using multiple times. We make sure that we're using the correct icon, depending on if it's charged or not. We add some extra information to the description if this item is charged. We register another icon to be able to use that. And finally, if it's charged when we use it, we reset the counter as well as shooting the mob away from us as well. So we're going to push it away into an arc, and it's going to fly away and probably die, actually. So that's a bit mean. So let's try that. I'm going to run the client here and move it up here. Come on. There you go. I couldn't move it while it was loading. Okay, so let's you're in the lecture 2 world. Okay, so we have this one of rocket, nothing special here. As you can see, it saves the amount of times we've used it because we're using the damage values, and the damage values are saved automatically. So let's shoot these mobs into the air. 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, 9 times, and boom! One of the rocket. This fun thing has been used 10 times. This item is charged, and as you can see, it's using another icon. Of course, the item damage of this wand has still, well, it's still 1, and therefore, I think I'm getting attacked. Yeah, therefore it's using the old icon, and it's not, well, telling us that it's charged because it's not. So I can just do that. It's doing the normal thing. Sweet. However, if I use the charged wand, I'm going to shoot the mob away from me as well, and it's going to go back to its initial state, like that. And then we can charge it up again, like this, and as soon as it reaches 10 charges, I can use it to fling the mob away from me again. 9 times, and here we go, 10 times, booyah. There you go. So now we can use different icons depending on, well, the item damage, as well as doing different things depending on the item damage. So we can shoot them straight up normally, but if it's charged, we've used it 10 times, then we can shoot it away from us. Okay, sweet. So what do we do now? Well, we're actually quite done with this wand for this lecture. We might go back to it later on, but for this lecture we're done with this wand. It's quite fun to play with. You can juggle some pigs, and yeah, whatever. What we want to take a look on is another way of using these item damages, these damage values. What can we use them for? Well, take the vanilla dice, for instance. They are 16 different ones. Do we use 16 different item IDs for them? If you know the answer to that, you know that no, we don't. We use just a single ID for them. How does this work? Well, we create subtypes, which all use the same ID, but we use different damage values for them. Should we do something similar? Yeah, I think so. We're going to use the 3 last textures that I have in the textures folder: the card arrow, the card box, and the card cross. And we'll see how we can implement those. So the one has been all fun and all, but we're pretty much done with it for now, at least. So first of all, we might want to go into item info here and give it some more values. So what I'm going to add is public static int card ID. Remember, we just have one ID for these, even though we have multiple. We're going to have multiple different cards. Public static final string card key, not car key, card key, and just call it card. So that's what we refer to it in the configuration file. Public static final int, and we have the default value. So for the default value, we obviously need another integer, and I'm just going to take the next one. So we had 24201 for the first one, and here I'm going to use 24202. And then public static final. So I'm just going to add all these names that we used the last, well, for the wand-list name. And this is a symbol card, like that. So that's the unlocalized name. That's how we refer to it when naming. And public static final string. And we want the card names as well, but we have multiple ones, so it would make sense to just store them in an array. But now you may think, well, didn't you say that for each name we want to register we need a unique unlocalized name? Well, that's totally true. You're paying attention, and it's not a difference here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this unlocalized name here as the base, and then I'm just going to add a number afterwards to tell it which one we want to use, basically. We'll see in a bit. Border card and cross card. So here are the different names that we want to use, but we might also want to, or well, we actually want to know where the icons are, which can be found here in this array. So we have card arrow, we have card box, and we have card cross, like that. Oops. There you go. Sorry about that. So obviously this is not doing anything. This is just the values we're going to use, but I wanted to prepare them all so we had them. What's the next step? Well, we go into the config handler, and in the config handler we want to read the information here. So we have item info dot card ID equals config dot get item. So we want to get the item there. Go away suggestions. Item info dot card key, so that's the key we want to refer to, and we also want the default here. Get the integer from there, and then subtract it by 256 to make the IDs work properly. Otherwise, we'll get IDs which are 256 numbers too high. So just adding the configs and adding all the values in the item info here. So it's just the same thing that we did with the wand, but we have two arrays here for the names and icons because we want multiple names and multiple icons for these different subtypes. Here we had two different fields, or well, two different constants for the wand icon and the wand charged icon, because then we had just two different icons that we used in different states, sort of, whereas here it makes much more sense to store them in one array. Okay, so those are just the values we're going to use. Now we of course need to create a new class here, and the class I'm going to create, and I'm creating it in the items package, which was outside of the screen, but yeah, it's going to be called item card, like that. Finish. And how do we do this? Well, some things are going to be the same as we did before, but yeah. So we want to extend the item. It's still an item, like that, and we need to import the item. The same thing here, and we of course need a constructor as well. Item card, and give it the ID. Okay, oops, stupid Eclipse, doing weird things for me. Okay, so we have a constructor here, like we usually have, and we need to send the ID along. And the last time we set the unlocalized name, we well, what did we do? We set the max stack size, and we set which creative tab to use. The only one of those we want to have is the creative tab. Okay. And which tab am I going to use this time? Well, I think that miscellaneous makes perfect sense this time for these cards. So we set which tab we want them to be in. Of course, if you create your own tab, you can refer to that one instead, like that. And what we want to do now when we have different subtypes is actually to tell the item that it has different subtypes, otherwise it won't work. So we do this by doing set has subtypes, and we set that to true, like that. Okay, so this is the only thing we need. We don't set the max stack size, which means that this max stack size will be 64. That's the default maximum of well, how many items you can have in a stack. Right. The unlocalized name, sorry, however, how do we do that? We said it last time, we need an unlocalized name for naming it properly. Well, there is a method called public string get unlocalized name that we can use instead, and we can give it different unlocalized names depending on the item stack itself. So, well, there are many methods inside item here, and it takes some time to learn what they are. I have no clue of all the different methods there, but there are a lot of methods there. So if you're trying to do something, just go and take a look in item and see if you can find a method that is supposed to be used for what you want. But this is something called a get unlocalized name, which I'm going to use instead, just because now we can give it different unlocalized names depending on the item stack. So instead of giving the item itself an unlocalized name, I'm going to give it sort of different names. There you go. So that's the unlocalized name that we use for the card. I want to add some differences to them by just adding the item damage afterwards. So it will be like symbol card 0, symbol card 1, symbol card 2 for the three different well, cards, basically. So that's that one. Next up, we might want to add the icons for these things. So what do we do? Well, let's add an array for the different icons. I think that would make sense. So side.client, because we just want them on the client side. Private icon array of icons. So in here I'm going to store the different icons, import the correct one, of course, the different icons that we're going to use for the different subtypes. How do we do this? Well, we do it similar to what we did before when we register icons. So last time we registered two icons, the item icon and the charged icon, on the client side only. And we did it in register icons, like this. Okay, so what do we do this time? Well, this time we want to loop through all the different icons that we have defined. Which are the icons we have defined? Well, we can go into item info. We have an array here of all the different icons we want to load. So we have 3 different icons, and we want to load them all. So how would we do this? Well, what would make most sense, I'm just importing icon register there, would be to have icons here, that's the array of icons that we want to use, equals new icon, and I set it to the size of that string. There you go. So now I'll prepare the array, so for each well, name of an icon we want to create an actual icon. When we have that array, we might want to loop through the whole thing like this to create one icon for each element. An empty array wouldn't make sense. So we refer to that index, and then we just register these different icons. Register.register icon and item info dot texture location. So now we just tell it where it is, and remember we need a texture location, which in this example is example. We have the colon and then the name of that texture, item info dot card icons at that specific index. So what does this mean? Well, if we go here and take a look on the folder that we do have, what we have are the card arrow, the card box, and the card cross. Up here we can see that it's in example. So we basically just tell it where we can find these textures, because in the item info here we have defined, so we have card arrow, card box and card cross, like that. So we load those things, and we might want to actually add them properly. And as you might see now, we're not using that item icon that we had before. And why is that? Well, that's just a default one, default variable that we could use if we want to. It wouldn't really make sense to have one of our icons there and the rest in the array. It would be very tricky to handle. So we can just ignore that icon variable altogether. Of course, that's going to be the default value to use. And we haven't specified which icons to use, so that's the one that is going to be used, which doesn't really make any sense. So what we might want to do is, well, tell it which icon to use, basically. Side.client, of course, so it's only on the client side. Public, and this is the same method we used before, get icon from damage. The last time when we used it, what did we do then? Well, we had an if is charged, and so if it was charged, then we used the charged icon. Otherwise, we used the other icon. What do we do this time? Well, it's much easier. We just use the damage value as an index in our array. There you go. Return the icon at that specific index. Nice. So are we done now? Well, you could say that, but no, not really. We have specified the different unlocalized names. Of course, we haven't registered the names yet, but we'll do that in a second. When we have registered the different icons and we use them properly. But when we add something into a creative tab in the creative inventory, we need to tell it which items to add. Otherwise, it don't know. Should I add the first one only, or should I have like 2 or 3 or 16, or what should it add? You don't really know that, so you're just going to add the first one. And mods like NEI, they use this method as well, so they are going to ask your item in the same way that the creative tab does, which items do you want me to add? So by adding things to the creative window, we will also see them appear in NEI, so double the joy, right? And it's very easy to use this method. Of course, it's only on the client side only, because, well, that list is only done on the client side. We don't really need to know anything about it on the server. And public void, it's called get sub items. We get an ID, we get the creative tabs, all the tab we're currently in, and we get a list. Usually you don't really use this middle one. That would be if you want to show it differently in different tabs. You add it to multiple tabs, and on this tab I want to add these specific items, while on this tab I want to add this one. So I'm not going to use this middle one, but of course we still need that parameter. Import a list, and the same thing goes here. Very important which list you import. The list we want to import is java.util.list, the top one for utilities, not the AVT one. AVT is for graphics, we don't want that. So java.util.list is the one we want to import. Now it's fairly simple. We want to loop through the different sub-items we do have. How do we check that? Well, we can use the names as a reference. We could use the icons as well. It doesn't really matter. So there we go, we loop through the different items that we do have, and for each item we want to create a stack for it. For each sub-item, I should say. Okay, new item stack, ID, 1 and I. Like that. So what this does is another way of creating an item stack. Last time we used it, we can go back to that in items here. We created a new item stack with the type wand. Wand is the item itself. Like I also said, we could add another number here to tell us how many items, well, what amount of items we have in that item stack as well, but we didn't do that. The default is 1. However, just giving it the item itself is not the only thing we can do. We can also give it the ID. So we get the ID from here. Well, it tells us, you there, which items do you want to add? This is your ID, like do something. So we create a new item stack with the given ID, and like I said, the second parameter here is the amount of items we have. It doesn't really matter, it just add as 1. And the final part here, which we can use if we want to, is the starting damage value. If that isn't specified, this item stack will start with the damage value of 0. But if we change that by adding I there, we're going to first create a stack with the item damage 0, because I equals 0. Next loop, we're going to add one with item damage 1, and the last time one with item damage 2. And 0, 1, and 2 for the damage values obviously represent which subtype we have. So when we get an icon from that specific damage, we're going to get 3 different icons. And since we have different unlocalized names for them, we can register different names for them as well. So we create a stack each here, but then we of course need to add that to the list, which is, well, it couldn't really have been simpler. So list.add stack. So we just add that to the list. So we add our 3 different item stacks there to tell it basically these are the 3 different items that I want you to add to the creative window. And then NEI and mods like that is going to use the same thing, so they will appear there automatically as well. Right. So we have a few things left, right? So the item class here is done. We have the unlocalized names, we're registering and loading the icons properly, and we're telling it from well, which items we do have. However, we might want to register the names as well, right? And the last time we did, if we did something similar, we would do add name and then like card, and oops, we don't have a card, so let's add that. Public static item cards. As you can see, it's very simple to add. We just do the same thing here that we did before. New item card item info dot card ID. So we need to use the other ID, obviously, like that. So now we can use card here, and we can do item info dot blah 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 name. But this is not what we want. We want 3 different names for the different sub items. And how do we do that? Well, they all do have different unlocalized names, because we took the unlocalized base name and added a number afterwards depending on their damage values. And because they have different unlocalized names, we can give them different names. But how do we do that? Well, it would make sense to loop through the different items and actually give them their names, don't you think? So what I need to do is loop here from 0, and while item info.card names, well, I is less than the length of those, so we loop through the different names basically, and then we can just register them one by one. And we do it the same way. We use add name, but instead of using our item here as the object to name it's called, we can use an item stack. So I'm going to do the same thing here, new item stack, and here I have the items. I can just use card and then one and then I. So I create a new item stack similarly to what I did back in item card, where I created a new item stack for each subtype and added those to the list here. So I do the same thing over here when we want to register all the names. We loop through the different subtypes we have and create an item stack with that specific subtype. That means that we have the object that we want to name. Each different subtype has its own unlocalized name, which is defined back up here in the item itself. Like that, they will all get a different unlocalized name, and therefore we can register different names to them without a problem. So the name for them, well, item info dot card names, and then just the name at the correct index. So loop through them all, add their names, but for that to work, we of course need different unlocalized names, because if we want items with different names, they need different unlocalized names. So if we just have one name, we can register the item itself. If we have multiple names, depending on the item, well, depending on the subtype, for instance, we might want to register this item stack instead. And that's pretty much it. Let's see if it works. Run the client. So if this works properly, we'll see a few different things. In the miscellaneous tab, we will see 3 different items because we told it we have 3 different subtypes. We will see that they all share the same ID, but still can be used as different items. Okay, let's see. Okay, so if I go back into creative mode, game mode 1, and go to miscellaneous and scroll down, we can see these 3 different items. We have the arrow card, the border cards, and the cross card, like so. If we go out here and oh right, it's a bit low, isn't it? There you go. That's better, right? And if I go F3H to start debugging, as you can see now, we see the IDs. Like crafting table has ID 58, the rotten flesh has ID 367, and so on. If we do that and take a look on these ones, we have the ID we specified, 24,202. It has /0, which means that its item damage is 0. Here we have the item damage 1, and here we have the item damage 2. So all of a sudden we have 3 different items sharing the ID. They have different icons and different names. Why is this good? Well, we might want to have items that do sort of similar things. At the moment, these items don't do anything at all. So, well, that's quite similar, isn't it? But, well, if you want to add something proper, then they can all do the same thing. And also, we don't need to use 3 different item IDs. If we had 3 different item IDs, we would have to have 3 different entries in the config file. Also, we would take up a lot of IDs. Remember, the damage value can go, well, have about 32,000 different values. So basically, we could have 32 different items with just one ID. Of course, it wouldn't make too much sense to have the same ID of the Wand of the Rocket as well as the border card, because they are supposed to be used for different things. So what should these cards do? Well, not too much really. They are just an example for now. How we can set up sub-items. We'll take a closer look what we can do with them, or well, we'll use them for some examples later on in further lectures. But that's pretty much it for now. We have created a wand that we can count the amount of times we have used. It has a description like that, and we're counting that, like I said. When we reach 10, it changes the icon, and we can use it to shoot the mob in an arc away from us instead of just straight up. Then it's going to reset and go back to where it was. We have a recipe for the Wand of the Rocket as well, and we have 3 of these different cards. However, if we want to add recipes for those cards, we do it the same way as we did over here. But remember to, for instance, do card 1, for instance. That's going to give us that border card. Of course, I just stole this recipe, so that's a bit bad. I will just add another version of it just below. So that's how you do it. And if you want to use it as a recipe item, like you want to use it in a recipe, then you just add the item stack here instead. So you can use the item, you can actually use a block as well, or you can use the item stack itself where you can give it the damage value. And then it's going to care about that damage value when it comes to the crafting part, so you can't use the arrow card when we're asking for the border card, for instance. Some practice about that can be seen in the what's it called, the question and exercises documents. There's some things you can work with there. So that's about it for today. Let's see what we've been talking about. First of all, we spoke about the basic of an item class. We extend the item, and we need to send along the ID of it. Set the creator tab would be quite nice, and in the end of the item class, well, after the constructor, we want to override a lot of different methods depending on what we want to do. It might be a bit tricky to know what methods there are to override, but if you want to take a closer look, then you can go into the item class itself. Right, and then what we have here is how do we set it up in a configuration file? Well, we read the configuration file like we did last time and load it, and in the end save it. But to load the value, we do config.getItem. But what we will have to be sure of, after getting the integer using getInt of course, we need to subtract it by 256. We shouldn't set it to 256, we should subtract it with 256, because when we create the item later, it's sort of going to increase that, so we're just balancing that, so we get the item ID we're asking for. So to have it in the config file allows players of your mod to change the values to make it work better with other mods, so we don't get any conflicts. Then we wanted to name things. Make sure to set the unlocalized name. If we just have one name, we can simply use set unlocalized name and give it this unlocalized name. An unlocalized name is sort of a name ID that we refer to. If we want to have multiple items with different names, they also need different unlocalized names. When we then want to set the name itself, we just do language registry.add name, and then we give it the item and the name. If we have multiple names for one item, for subtypes for instance, we can override get unlocalized name with an item stack and return differently depending on the damage value of the item stack. But remember, then when we add the name, we have to refer to the item stack rather than just the item. Then we had icons here. So to register an icon, we do, well, that method there, public void register icon register, and then we can register it quite easily. We just do register icon, and we add first the texture path, then the colon, and then the wand icon. The texture location is very simple. It's not like multiple folders, it's just like example for instance, and that would put it in the example folder. And then we have the name, which is not like wand.png, it is just wand, just the name, not the extension. So for instance, we will put it here in MCP folder, source, Minecraft assets, texture location, textures, items, and then wandicon.png. So in our example, that would give us Steve's example /source /Minecraft /assets /example /textures /items /wand.png. So depending on what you've named the different things, you obviously need to put it in different locations. Of course, it also depends what you have named your MCP folder, because it should be in there. Then we had damage values, and here we can see when we use it, we add some information, a description to it depending on the damage value of the item. The reason why we do this is of course because we just have one single item class, so if we change values of the items, it's not going to be unique to each and every instance of this item. Therefore, we change the item damage, well, the damage value of the item stack instead, because we have one item stack for each instance of the item that we have. So if I have an iron sword and my friend has an iron sword and we have one in a chest as well, we have 3 different item stacks, and these will have a damage value. In the case of a sword, it's going to be how broken it is, how repaired it is, depending on the way you look at it. So they might have different damage values, but they will all refer to the same item, the base item iron sword. Next thing we have is of course multiple icons. We had, well, first of all the wand that we made sure that it was charged. So after 10 uses it changed its appearance to another icon, and then we could just push them away. But we wanted the icon to be different, and the way we do it is we override get icon from damage, and we get an integer with the damage value of the item stack. Then we can use that damage value to return different icons. So here we return the charged icon if the damage value told us that it was charged. So in the example we had is charged as a method, which basically returned true if the damage value was 10 or greater. So after 10 uses we would return the charged icon, otherwise we would return the normal item icon. And in the end we had these subtypes, which were a bit special in a few different ways. We had to say that it had subtypes in the beginning using has subtypes true. Then we had to give it different unlocalized names, but we have already spoken about that a few slides ago. And of course we need to tell it which icons to have. So we loop through the different icons we want to load them all, and then return them depending on, well, which item stack we have, so which icon we want. And finally we will need to tell it here, as we can see on the slide, which sub items we have. So what we do is we create a new item stack with the appropriate ID and damage value, that first row there, and then we add it to the list. And all the items that we do add to this list are the items we will see in the creative tabs or in mods like NEI. What does this mean to us when we don't have sub items? Well, if we don't have sub items and don't override this, it's just going to add it once. So if we don't override this method when we do have sub items, we will only see one type of the item, the one with damage value 0, if any of our sub items have that. And finally, we had the crafting. So we just do game registry.add recipe, then we give it the output item there, the output item stack, and in this case it's very simple, just new item stack and want. We could of course do like new item stack card, comma 1, comma 2, which would give us the subtype with ID 2, because I had a 2 in the end, which would be the cross card, if I don't remember wrong. And after that, we need to create the thingy there, the crafting grid, and use spaces for unknown things, or blank things, and just use other characters for the different objects you want. And then afterwards, you need to specify these different characters, what they are of. So we have an X there, and then item.golden_carrot, which means that every X in that grid that we had up there means that we want a golden carrot there. And then we have slash means string, not string, stick. So we have 2 sticks and 1 golden carrot. Of course, it doesn't matter which symbols you use, you just have to use the same in the grid and in the description afterwards. And of course, you can just put everything on one single line if you want to. This is split up in different ones, well, to just make it easier to see. Okay, then we have the final thing, the question and exercises, like always. So remember to take a look on that. Those will be uploaded to the lecture page. I'm going to upload them as soon as this lecture ends. So the questions will go through a bit of what we've learned here to see if you've learned it. Then we have an exercise where you can create some items there, and this time we actually have a bunch of further explorations where you can continue and create some items. The ones at the moment in this lecture is some items that kills mobs instantly, but that's further exploration, so that includes some part that we haven't been talking about during this lecture. And as I also mentioned, one of those further explorations are about setting up your own creative tab, but those are a bit more tricky to do, a bit more advanced, so they do not have any possible solutions, we have answer to the question and possible solutions to the exercises, of course. But that's pretty much it for today. This has been Forging a Minecraft Mod, lecture number 2, items. I've been VSWE, and I hope to see you next time when we talk about blocks. Goodbye.